if you're a parent, you're going to want to listen up because there are mistakes that we all make, right? I know I made my fair share of them. Today, we're going to be talking about mistakes that parents make and how you can correct those. So if you're a parent, and especially if you're in the throes of parenting right now, this is going to be a great episode for you to listen to, because who doesn't want to have their children learn how to become better human beings later in life? It starts at home, y'all. It starts at home. So stay tuned. We're going to be talking about that in just a moment with one of our authors in our book, The Book I Read, Dinalynn Rosenbush. We'll be right back. Hi, my name is Linda Sunshine West. I'm the founder and CEO of Action Takers Publishing, and we love showcasing our authors. And today I'm excited to talk about a topic that I wish I knew about this, 40 years ago. My son just turned 40, and my daughter is going to be 40 this year. My son's going to be 41. And so I wish I knew a little bit more about parenting, when I was younger, but that's okay, because we're here to teach you, not we. Dinalynn is here to teach you about parenting. So Dinalynn, before we get started, I just want to introduce our audience to Action Takers Publishing. If you're not following us yet, we are on Facebook, on LinkedIn, and on YouTube. You can find us. We're Action Takers Publishing on all 4 of those platforms. So Dinalynn, we're going to be talking today. We're going to kind of touch about some of the problems, some of the mistakes parents make. So just some of them, because I'm sure there's a huge volume of books and books and books that can be written on these topics. But first of all, why don't you introduce yourself, tell us who you are and what it is about what you do that got you into it.
Sure. Thank you so much for having me. It was very fun to be part of the book, and this is a delight and an honor to be part of your show. So what got me into teaching parents is that by profession, I'm a speech language pathologist, and I work with parents that have kids with speech and language delays. And then with the book chapter, that was part of an evolution from working in the school system for a long time to working on my own, where now I'm targeting parents and coaching them. And in that process, one of the things that I constantly came across is ways that were the consistently repeated ways that parents make mistakes. And of course, as a parent myself, I saw myself in it. But when we look at somebody else doing it, we're like, oh, I see it now. And then the mirror comes back and we say, oh, I'm doing it too. Because we do. We all do. Yeah. So yeah, that's where it came from. So I was working in the schools, and for 30 years as a speech path, I had gotten sick. I was profoundly sick. And then during that recovery time, this book that I wrote about, there it is. Look at that on the screen. The Power of Imagination, Unlocking Your Ability to Receive from God by Andrew Wommack. That was a very instrumental book in changing the way I think. And when I started to use my imagination differently, I started thinking, wait a minute, what do I not like about this job? And what do I like? And how can I make what I like be part of my new career? And what I found was that I love working with parents. I love working with kids, but I didn't like the paperwork.
Right.
Yeah. In special education, you have a lot of paperwork. And I didn't like always having a rigid schedule and being in a small classroom constantly. So there was a couple of features of the job I didn't like. So now I'm doing a lot of what I love, which is just coaching the parents and helping them to be able to help their kids.
That right there is one thing I think to take away from this listening is that, find out what you love doing and go do that. It's, life is too short. If you're a person who loves to do all that paperwork, awesome, more power to you. But that was not for Dinalynn, and I totally get it as a reformed legal secretary. It's like paperwork was everything. Paperwork is everything. But if you figure out what you love and go do that. Because there's a saying, I can't remember exactly what it is, but it says something about what this world needs is people who are doing what they love, because that's what's going to light up the world. And that's kind of the synopsis of the saying. And I don't remember who it was by or anything, but I love that because we need more people doing what they love. And you found that. And as you mentioned, this book was kind of like the catalyst to that, the power of imagination, unlocking your ability to receive from God. That was kind of like the catalyst that drove you from what you were doing. And really, it was the Lyme disease that was the catalyst that led you to that book.
Mhm.
And that was the process. And so sometimes it takes a 2x4 to be hit over our head, or something like Lyme disease to hospitalize you, to make you look at life differently. And so, are you grateful for your Lyme disease today?
Well, that's an interesting way to phrase it, and I will clarify I wasn't hospitalized, but but I was
Oh,
profoundly sick nonetheless. And I will say that I'm grateful for the growth and the learning and the result of the growth and learning.
mhm.
So maybe in a way, gratitude for the Lyme disease itself, I'm working on.
Yeah, I know it was a weird question kind of to ask, I think, but I just felt
Yeah.
to ask it. So,
Well, I hear you because a lot of times, like I've had other trials in my life, going through divorce and things like that. And I can
right.
say now I'm grateful for that. And, earlier on, I was grateful for that too. But initially, I wasn't, so it takes a
Yeah.
while sometimes to be grateful. When you get far enough out from it, then you're like, oh, yeah, I can see why that was something that I needed. And indeed, I can, but I wish I had done it a different way.
Yeah, I hear you. There's some things that took me almost 60 years to be grateful for. And
Mm,
so, I think it depends on what it is,
yeah.
and how severely it impacted us, maybe, or something. But
Mhm.
let's go ahead and switch gears, because we're
Yeah.
going to talk about parenting, children. And I have two children. They're 40 and 41 this year. I'm not going to rush it because they're not those ages yet. But and I myself was a child at one time. I ran away when I was 5 and was gone for an entire week. And the reason I'm sharing this is because what happened during that week is something that is kind of interesting, because as I look back on it from at this age, and my mother is now passed, so I can't ask her any questions related to it. So I've had to kind of surmise my own ideas of what happened during that time, because I never did sit down and ask my mom about it. But I was gone for a week, and I just went to the neighbor's house. So I was in a safe environment. My mom knew where I was, but I didn't know my mom knew where I was. So at 5 years old,
Mhm.
my belief that was instilled within me, that I instilled within myself, was that they didn't come to get me because they don't love me and they don't want me around. And so that one behavior, that one week, shaped a lot of who I became for the next decades to come, 46 years actually, exactly. And that one incident of how it was handled by my parents was something that I'm imagining that my mother was like, she's safe. I know where she is. She was checking in with the neighbor every day. And finally, after a week, she called the neighbor and said, she's been gone long enough. You can send her home now. Like, I would have stayed there forever, you know? And
Mhm.
so I want to just kind of, if you want to, I'd like to explore that just a little bit, because this might be beneficial for parents that are listening and thinking about the way we react and or respond to our kids. So looking at that, first of all, and it's okay to call things out as what they are. Was that a
Mhm.
mistake that my mom made? And how could she, if so, how could she have handled that situation differently?
Thank you for that question. I think in retrospect, when you consider the impact that it had on you and how you did not know what was going on, we know that that was a mistake, because what you understood from it isn't what the truth was of the situation. In that regard, yes, it was a mistake. Now,
Mhm.
from her perspective, she may not have thought it was a mistake. Like you're saying, she knew where you were. She was letting you learn. She was letting you have a lesson, whatever. Maybe she didn't know that that was a mistake. But this is a common thing that parents do, and this is one of the things I actually teach about a lot. Parents tend to
Mhm.
think that our kids think what we think. We parents tend to
We
think our
say that
kids
again. Rephrase
parents
that and say that
yeah.
again.
We tend to think as parents that our kids think what we think.
Okay.
So your mom then, to translate it, may well have been thinking, of course Linda knows I'm checking on her. Of course Linda knows I love her. Of course Linda knows I want her to come home, so I don't need to tell her. Of course she knows that. Because mom would be assuming you know what she knows. You think what she thinks.
Mm,
That's never the case, as you just exemplified.
right.
And so even in small moments of our lives, when we're saying to the children, take out the trash, and they may or may not really process what it is that you're saying, because they might be thinking about the video game they just were playing. So they heard half your sentence. They might be thinking about the last time they took out the trash and they tripped on the stairs and hurt their knee. They might be thinking about any number of things, and then they process by smushing together what you say with what they were thinking or feeling. This is normal, and kids do it all the time. So what we say to our children, we regularly need to check in on. We regularly need to find out, what did you think that I meant? Not ask the kids. Here's the other thing we say. Do you understand? What is a kid's normal response to that question? What do you
Yes.
think? Yeah, they say yes, or they just nod silently. That is the only response a child is going to have to, do you understand? They know they better not say no, because it probably wasn't complex, or they don't
Right.
want to be embarrassed, or they don't want to have it explained again to them when they didn't understand. Like they don't know what to say. So they say, yep, or they nod. And then we parents tend to think that they do understand, and we move on with our day expecting them to follow through with what it is we say. So in the case of your mom, I would say the mistake that she made was in her assuming your understanding, in assuming what she thought you knew, in assuming that you were going to be just fine, because emotionally, clearly, you were not, because it did impact you severely through the rest of your life. So you weren't really emotionally fine.
Yeah, it's interesting because I am imagining, because I don't remember the actual situation. My mom told me about this when I was probably about 30, and she laughed about, like, it was a funny thing, and we all laughed about it. And I didn't realize that it wasn't laughable until I was 51 and hired a life coach who helped me to see the unlaughability of the situation. But
Yeah.
I'm sure that I was just there at my friend's house, playing Barbies and having a good time, not really knowing what was going on in my little brain. And I think that's what's so fascinating. What you're talking about here today is, the simple question of, what did you think I just said?
Mm-hmm.
It's not a yes or no question. It's just asking them, how did you interpret?
Mm-hmm.
Of course, using the word interpret, probably not a good word because they
Well,
wouldn't know what that means.
that depends on the age of the child, and if you use
True.
that,
Yeah.
because you can teach, a child of 3 the word interpret if you use it often enough in a context they understand. No words are magical. And so we don't want to withhold certain words from our kids. We just conceptually want to make sure that they're getting it. And in order for them to get it, it has to have frequent use. So, yeah, use
Wow.
those words. But, depending on the age of the child, you might say, what did I say? Or
Mm-hmm.
show me what I said. If the child is young. If your child is 10, you can say, interpret what I said. If that's a common vocabulary word. And if your child is, older yet, you might ask them to, tell you the details about, you tell them to pick up their sister, maybe they're 16, pick your sister up at work. Now, tell me the details of what I said. And then they need to realize, I have to finish supper. I have to get gas in the car. We talked about that earlier today. You're going to give me the money to do it. Then I'm going to pick up my sister, and we need to be home by 9:00. If they're older, they would give you the details back. It just depends on that understanding and realizing that their brains are immature. And just because they know something, especially young ones, but it happens again in this cycle in the teen years where their brain has this massive expansion. And so they have what I like to think of as misfires or hiccups in their understanding in their brain. There's like a misfire. They have a gap of understanding because their brains are in such massive expansion mode. And it's kind of like a mirror example of what happens when they're toddlers in that language expansion. So they miss stuff. And then, so to check their understanding, to see if they really know the message. And here's another thing I want to call attention to. Most of the time, I'm working with parents of kids that have a speech and language delay or of some sort, whether it's diagnosed or not. Maybe the child just sounds wrong. And when we speak to our children and they say sounds wrong, we can be pretty sure that their hearing sounds wrong. If their hearing sounds wrong and you're talking with them, they're not understanding what you say all the time. And you say, take out the garbage. And they hear, take out the tarbage. And they wonder, what are you talking about? And I tell you, you can have the garbage can in front of you. You can even be holding it in your hands, and you can be in the middle of the kitchen, handing them a zip tie and say, take out the garbage. And they look at that tie in their hands. They nod yes, that they're understanding. And they leave the room and go play Legos. And there was nothing about willful disobedience there. But it sure looks like it, doesn't it?
That is fascinating. That's just our brains are fascinating. We're all different. Every single one of us is different. And so it's what I'm hearing is the importance of parents to communicate with their children. And we talk about communication all the time in marriages, and in children. But it's like that importance of learning how to communicate with our children in a way that they understand what we're saying and we understand what they're saying, right? It's like this back and forth for us,
That's exactly actually the line that I use in my podcast, which is communicate with your child in a way their brains understand. Their brains are not developed yet. If they're using speech sounds wrong, they don't hear clearly necessarily. So they may we have to assume that there's a hiccup in their understanding. If they're, especially in the teen years or in the toddler years, but certainly outside of that too, where they don't necessarily understand, even when we think that they do. They don't think the way we think. And when we expect that, we're not actually communicating. So their behavior is going to be what demonstrates if they actually understand.
Would you write a book called Parents Are from Mars and Children Are from Venus? I was just thinking it would be kind of cool to have a book based on like the parents, like the mother and the father, like the Mars and Venus thing, and then maybe the kids are from the moon or something. I don't know.
That's a great concept. I hadn't thought of that, but I have thought about writing a book with my learnings from my career. I just haven't done it yet. But yes, there's so many times.
That would be fascinating to put together a scenario. This is what mom heard. This is what dad heard. This is what child heard. And just like conjecture. But it would just kind of be fun to read the difference in like what's happening in our brains, because women and men talking in conversations, like there's sometimes challenges of communicating that way, and then communicating with children, the children communicating with the mom as opposed to the child communicating with the father, right? So we got all these various potentials of what can go wrong in a conversation. So I know you alluded to your podcast. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your podcast, the title of it, and then right now what we're talking about, you can hear in episode number 102, which is top 4 mistakes parents make and how to correct them. But tell us a little bit about your podcast.
Sure. My podcast is titled The Language of Play, and it is focused primarily on parents of kids that have some kind of communication or listening delay or hiccup. Just they're not doing what they're told. They're not listening well. And so there's 150 episodes right now as of this recording, 152, something like that. And as of this recording. And 102 is the one we were referring to, the top 4 mistakes parents make and how to correct them. And one of those mistakes is that parents tend to think kids think what they think. And there's many episodes on how do you help your child learn to develop speech? How do you help your child learn to listen better? And then to think about what is actually listening. Does it mean comprehend what you hear, or does it mean do what you're told? Or does it mean many other things in there? There's a lot of ways we can expect our kids to listen. And we think it means one thing, like do what you're told, and they think it means hear it. And they say, yeah, I heard it. And we can aggravate our children so easily and send them into behaviors that we didn't intend to. And it looks like willful disobedience, but it isn't always, especially if we're in the presence of some kind of speech or communication or listening delay.
You have one of your episodes is called Tantrum versus Meltdown. And I think that's a good one to listen to as well. If you have children who tend to go into meltdowns, us understanding why they do this. Now, there's not one reason or one answer to everything, but
Right.
these, just like, hearing these different podcast episodes can help us to see things differently or think things differently. I remember I was talking to a parenting coach, recently, and she mentioned how kids go through stages, and these stages are like from this age to that age, on average, right? This
Mhm.
age to that age, this is what's going on in their brain. This age to that age, this is what's, and it was so enlightening to think that, gosh, if I were to go back in time and raise a child with that understanding, how would our
Mhm.
relationship have been better? Because I'm sure it would have been better had I had a more understanding of, what's going on inside their brain, as well as maybe even what's going on inside of my own brain. So you
Right,
want to speak to that
exactly.
a little bit?
Exactly. And going to the classes, of CEUs and master's classes, all those things as a speech therapist, so that I would get more skills to work with kids that have a different brain, neurodivergent and all those things. And then I look at my own children and I think that special education knowledge helped me to parent better. And then as I learned to parent
Mm.
better, then I looked at my students and I thought, I'm going to use that with my students. Now I know how to be a better teacher. And then I learn a little
Mm.
more and I could be a better parent. And then I could be a better teacher. But yes, if I had had all the knowledge when my first child was born and all the way through, boy, I would have been a better parent all around. And so I really want to have a lot of these skills accessible, because I was raising my children before the internet, just like you were. And
Right.
now there's a lot accessible to parents. And much of it is good, but sometimes it's hard to weed through the information. There's a fantastic amount of resources, and
Yeah.
weeding through the amount is hard. So I encourage parents to email me or to ask me, and I would be happy to help them with guiding them to which episodes or whatever it is that we can do to help.
Awesome. I love that. So again, the podcast is titled The Language of Play. You can go find that. And then also you can connect with Dinalynn she's on Linktree, The Language of Play. It's linktr.ee/ The Language of Play. Go over there. You can see her podcast. You can just click on the link on her Linktree. It'll take you to her podcast, finding those episodes. The ones we're talking about today are episodes number 36, Tantrum versus Meltdown, and number 102, Top 4 Mistakes Parents Make and How to Correct Them. So if this is something you're interested in, please head on over there and find out a little bit more about those episodes and learn what you can. Here's the thing is that the better communication we have, this is my own belief, I'm throwing this out there, the better communication we have with our children, the better communication they will have with their children. Like
Hmm.
we teach
Yes.
them, we teach our kids how to be until later when they go through therapy and figure out what's all wrong. Like that was me. I'm talking about myself. Okay.
Well,
and, and
you got it right though. We learn from our parents and then we implement what it is that we learned until we know better. And then when we
yeah,
know better, then we do better. And then they start to take on the better, but they've maybe by that time already had children that they have raised, that they need to undo what they have done. I mean, it's all of us, isn't it?
yeah, it's the cycle, right? And so we
It
can
is.
stop the cycle by learning. Even like if you're thinking of having kids, go listen to these episodes because you're going to be able to learn now, and then you'll be able to implement as the kids are growing up. And just imagine, especially if you're a child who grew up in maybe a not a great environment, let's put it that way, and you want to do things differently. How are you
Mhm.
going to do things differently if you don't learn differently? And so I'm like, I feel like I'm a mother, like saying, go do this. I am a mother. And I'm saying, go do this. So anyway, gosh, I can't believe we're already out of time. It's so frustrating because time goes too fast. Well, let's just talk briefly about the book I read. This is a book that you've joined us in, and
Mhm.
you wrote a chapter. It's called "Did God Really Give You the Power to Heal Yourself?" And so you want to just talk a little bit about your chapter. Don't give it all away, and then you can get your copy of the book I read at actiontakerspublishing.com/TBIR, which stands for The Book I Read. So share us just a little bit about your chapter.
Sure. I guess at the beginning, I clumsily did tell about it as I was answering that first question, because
Right.
this book was a transformative book for me. What happened is that as I was sitting in my bed sick with Lyme disease, I opened this book and I read the phrase, "Your life is exactly as you imagined it to be." And I slammed the book shut and said, "No, it isn't."
Yeah, exactly. Denial.
And then I thought maybe I misread that, and I opened the book again, and that's what it said, and I got so mad that I threw the book across the room. But I love books. I don't do that with books, and so I had to pause and think, "What in the world happened inside of me emotionally that's gonna kick up that kind of storm at this, words that I these words that I hear?" And so, that's what generated this for me. It caused me to go deep into reading it because I figured I have to if I've got that kind of response to it. And then I learned that the power of our imagination really can transform our lives, and we have to start knowing what we're thinking about that we might not realize we're thinking about.
Mm,
Yeah, what we
yeah.
noodle on is creating a lot of our reality, and I didn't know that.
Yeah. That's big. That's huge. I mean, that's
Yeah,
life altering. And
it was real. Mhm.
yeah. Well, I love how you picked the book back up. Who introduced you to the book that made you start to read the first page anyway?
I actually had gone to a chiropractor, and the chiropractor said to me, "You need to read this." And he handed it to me with no explanation. That was it.
Mhm.
And I said, "Okay." I just kinda he put it in my hands, and then it says on it to return it, and I thought, "Well, if I have to return it, I may as well read it. I'm just kinda sitting here trying to recover from this disease." And, yeah, that was actually all there was with getting it. There was no conversation, just told, "You need to read this."
Wow. Wow. That's great. I mean, what insight he had. And there was probably something that he was seeing that was going to be helpful for you, and he introduced you to it. That's the power of books, y'all.
Yeah,
It's the power of books. Well,
yeah.
that's awesome. I love it. Again, we're talking to Dinalynn Rosenbush. She's in The Book I Read. She tells her story of transformation from reading the book called The Power of Imagination. So get your copy of the book I read at actiontakerspublishing.com/TBIR. There are also free gifts from our authors. Go get those as well. So Dinalynn, they can connect with you on Linktree at The Language of Play,
Mhm.
and excited to hear how these words have transformed their lives, because the thing is that we need help. We need help because we only know what we know through who we've learned from and who we've met. And if the things aren't working out the way we want them to work out, there are people out there that can help us
Mm.
to make them turn out the way we want them to turn out. Your life is not destined for whatever you've happened in the past. It's not destined to continue to be that way unless you decide not to do anything. So just go and listen to those podcast episodes, especially if you have children right now or are thinking
Mhm.
of having children. And then also if you're a teacher, or if you're a counselor, go listen to those episodes. There might be something that you'll learn. You don't know everything, although you might think you do. You don't know everything. Like, I don't know everything. I learned a lot today just from this one little episode right here. So, Dinalynn, last words like you would like to share with our listeners today.
Sure. First, I'll comment that the podcast is very strategy driven, so it is quite
Mm,
appropriate for parents that have kiddos right now they're dealing with, and teachers and anybody that is currently involved with children. And the words that I would have for somebody is, just because you don't understand doesn't mean it doesn't work. And that would be from that book too. Not those words from the book. Those words are from me, but that was kind of what I took away from that book, because your thoughts are an exact replica of the thoughts, wishes, and wants that you have. And even when it
mm,
doesn't seem like it, it's there.
wow, that's big. You got me thinking. Now I'm going to go to a deep thought right. And thank you so much for being part of this book and for sharing your knowledge and wisdom.
Yeah.
And keep doing what you're doing. I'm so happy that you discovered that what you had been doing the last 30 years. Maybe not the whole 30 years. It was not what was ideal for you, but towards that end, you're like, this isn't really, I don't want to spend my time writing reports. I want to do something different and be able to make more of an impact, because you can help more people when you're not writing reports. That's the one thing, right? Yeah. So thank you so much for being here. I truly appreciate you.
Thank you so much, Linda. It's been an honor.
You took the overwhelm out of the whole entire process. You said you set the guidelines, you said how many words to have. And it's like, once I sat down and started typing, it just all came out so quickly and so easily. And I loved it. And I had fear to write. And I know about that. I know about that blockage within myself, but it just was so amazing how easy the process was working with Action Takers Publishing.